Hello friends, this is David Sami with A Christian Journey. I want to welcome you to our Tuesday night Bible study. And today we want to look at some of Satan's tactics. How was he able to make Eve believe things about God and his ways that were not true? Because he uses the same tactics today in our own personal life and in our society. He begins by asking questions from Eve to make God's command appear nonsensical. Doesn't make sense. Why would a good God prevent you from taking the fruit of a tree that seems to be beneficial? It's supposed to make you wise. Maybe he has an ulterior motive. Maybe he really doesn't have your best interest at heart. You see, he wanted to manipulate the command of God to make God appear as he doesn't have Eve's best interest at heart. And ultimately, to make Eve to be the judge and the decision maker. Is God telling me the truth? Does he have my best interest at heart or no? Maybe he doesn't. You see, he does the same thing in our lives today. There will be times in our lives when we come across certain things that we want to do. And we want to do these things so badly. And it doesn't appear to us that anything is wrong with it. But we know it goes against God and his ways. And we have a struggle with that. Lord, why did you prevent this? Or why should I be able to do this? I cannot see how it would harm anyone. Why are you preventing this? And that struggle begins to become intense. And sometimes we may even want to ask advice from someone. But when we want to ask advice, it isn't so much for clarity. We want someone to basically tell us that it's okay, show us a loophole to be able to do what we want, even though God has prohibited. You see, that is the problem, where he is able to make the commands of God appear that it just doesn't make sense. Or why would God say that? Let me show you an example that how he even manipulates society this way. Say, for example, in the Bible, it says for the wives to submit to their husband. Now, someone who has anti-God feeling or someone who is being manipulated by Satan, he could come out and make a movie, and in that movie he shows how a beautiful woman that is trying to submit to her husband and how her husband abused her, how he was mean to her. And he will be able to, in a sense, communicate to us that, you see, here is a picture of somebody who's trying to obey the command of God, but look at the result. Look at how things worked out. And we go away with a struggle because in our mind, we think that, okay, she tried to do that, but look at the outcome. Look at what happened. And somehow we have to figure out a way to justify that in our mind. And when we can't, then we begin to become uncomfortable with that command of God. But you see, all along, we were manipulated into drawing that conclusion. The whole goal was for us to draw a conclusion that God's ways don't work. They don't make sense. And then we were able to connect the command to the person of God. And this path would make us to wander away from God, go away from him, because we begin to struggle with the things that God has said. But you see, in that command, there is a second part, which emphasizes for the husband to love their wife. But you see, that part was left out. We may even know people who supposedly try to live out that way, and it didn't work out for them. But you see, we were not behind closed door to see, did they apply that command properly? Did they go too far? Were they extreme? Did both parties did their part and it didn't work out? All of those facts are left out. But we are only shown one side of the story, one picture, and based on that picture, we become the judge of God and come to conclusion with, maybe these things don't work out today, or maybe this command is not just. And the second part is that when we begin to want to maintain and hold on to those convictions, but society at large has moved on from them, we keep those convictions to ourselves because we feel like we can no longer express them. Or we begin to somehow begin to go around that command. We don't emphasize it because we just don't think it's going to work out. Or maybe in our heart of heart, we feel like it's not even justified. But you see, all along we were manipulated by showing a picture that distorted God, His intention, and His ways. He always wants what is best for us. He always gives commands that are beneficial for us. But we get manipulated by Satan to become the judge of those commands. And if it goes against our wishes and desire, we begin that struggle. And the second thing he manipulated Eve was make decision based on self-interest. And that self-interest really takes on in two forms. One is self-interest, and the other one is self-preservation. You see, again, there's going to come times in our life when we come across opportunities or things that we want to capitalize on, but it goes against God and His ways. We have to do maybe some dishonest part in order to capitalize on that opportunity. But when we come to that fork in the road, the temptation to capitalize on the opportunity is so powerful that we rationalize or we disobey God's command. You see, part of our problem is that during the course of our Christian walk, there's going to be times that we love certain things above loving God. We all like to believe that we love God with all of our heart, and given a temptation, we will remain faithful to God. But many times that's not true. Because in our heart of heart, at certain junctures in our Christian walk and growth, there are places in life that we like certain things above God, but we don't like to admit that to ourselves. It feels horrible, or we don't like to think of ourselves that way, but in reality, it is. And true spiritual growth, it takes a while. It's very gradual. But if we remain faithful to God and continue on that path of growth, there comes a time that our love for God exceeds the love for self-interest or capitalizing on opportunities not in a godly way. And in my own personal life, I've discovered that if we be loyal to God, in those junctures, God stands back and leaves the ball in our court. How do you decide? Do you go forward by capitalizing, but by being unfaithful to me? Or do you remain loyal and maybe let go of these opportunities because it's contrary to me? During those times, maybe we ask for a sign from God or for God to make it clear. But in reality, it is clear. In our heart, we know what we should be doing, but we don't like to do what we want to do. We want to capitalize. We want to take this opportunity. We want self-interest to be fulfilled at the same time as loyalty to God. And sometimes it can be both at the same time. You have to choose. But I've come to realize that in life, it is better to be the people of principle, to function out of principle, not out of opportunity, not out of capitalizing on opportunities at the expense of disloyalty to God. Because at the end of the day, our lives are in the hand of God. An opportunity may seem very interesting, but as we go into it, it may turn out not the way we thought or anticipated. But if we remain loyal to God and let go of that opportunity because it's not the right way or it makes us unfaithful to God, God sees it. God knows how we have struggled with it, and we decided to be faithful to Him. And He is the only one that has ultimate control over our lives. He is the one that can turn the situation in our favor. And we be able to look back at our path, not only with sense of self-respect, but even in a natural way, things turn out better for us. Because ultimately, God is in control of everything. And the second part that we need to be careful of is a sense of self-preservation above loyalty to God. If you recall, Jesus was on his way to Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, and he told his disciple that when he goes there, he's going to be abused and he's going to be put to death. But Peter pulls Jesus to the side and says to him basically, let it far be away from you that you should go to Jerusalem, that you should go down a path that is going to harm you. No, think of yourself. Why do you want to do this? But Jesus could see right through that this wasn't Peter. This was Satan speaking through Peter and wanting to deter him from the course that God had for him. But you see, it's the same way with us. Many times we think God and His ways are difficult. It's a struggle. And we forsake that path, not because we have tried it and to see that no, it just doesn't work. It's just not the right path. No. We avoid it because of the perception of difficulty. And we like to spare ourselves from what is ahead. But you see, this is another trap of Satan. Self-preservation at the expense of loyalty to God. But if we, again, put loyalty to God above all else and do things God's way, we not only discover that it was ultimately in the long run the best option, but it was not difficult at all. It just has that appearance. And that appearance is what deters us, make us to go away. But in reality, it's always the best. You see, Satan wants to separate the command of God from the person of God. And for us to focus on the command and analyze the command based on our own self-centered logic. And based on our own self-centered logic, when it doesn't make sense, it will cast a shadow on who God is. It will cast a shadow on His ways. And we begin to avoid that way. We begin to part ways. But the whole goal was all along to get us to go into a different path. But we need to always remember who gave the command. A God who loves us and always tells us to do what is best for us. Whether it makes sense to me or not is really irrelevant. We don't stand and judge God and His command. We were made to conform to His command and become like Him. We should always keep that in mind. We should always attach the command of God to the person of God and realize who it is that is giving us this command. And loyalty to Him should remain above all things. And life will prove to us not only what's the best path, but how we change and we become the right kind of people as a result of obeying those commands. So, just some thought, because this was how he was able to manipulate Eve in a way that she began to judge God and decided that no, maybe what he told me was not true, and go the other way. But if we recognize that manipulation, separation of God from His command, and looking at the command, whether it makes sense to us or not, we could fall into the same trap. But for us to put loyalty and obedience to God above everything else, and we would discover not only it was for best, we discover the power of God. You know, many times today we hear, where is the power of God? How come we don't see things that we read about in the book of Acts? Well, maybe one reason is that we don't have the loyalty to God. We don't obey God. But we want God to conform to us and to our ways. We want God to conform to our self-interest. And therefore, we don't discover the real God. What we like is an alternate God and false image. So, just a few things to keep in mind. But next time, we want to talk about the result of the fall, the result of this disobedience on human race, on us collectively as a race of people. What was the impact of the disobedience to God? We want to pick that up next week. But until then, may you have a wonderful week. May you ponder on these things and examine our level of loyalty to God, our level of obedience to God, and set that as a priority in our lives. And watch. Let life be a test tube that we would see how what God says is true and how He loves us deeply. But until then, until next week, may the Lord be with you. May He watch over you, and may He keep you, and may He make His face to shine upon you and give you peace. This is David Sami with the Christian Journey.